Welcome to the Radical Middle Podcast, where we believe the right solutions start with asking the right questions. With your host, Thomas McMurtry.
Hello, welcome to the Radical Middle. I'm Thomas McMurtry, joined here by my dear friend Ian Hall for another conversation on our series on the Canadian economy and the macro effects of our emphasis on real estate investment. Hey Ian, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Thomas. Good to see you.
Fantastic.
So we want to talk about, we've been having some great discussions about learning about how our economy is working and some of the really strong academic basis behind it through your good work over the years, and especially in your last, your master's. But, you know, one of the things I always struggle with, though, is like, did the housing economy make us any richer in Toronto and certainly in Canada?
Yeah, well, this is one of the central questions that we've been circling around. And for our listeners that have followed the series thus far, they may have felt like we've touched on this more or less, but I want to dive in deeper this episode. And that's really the question these days in Canada. There's a lot of talk about feeling a little poorer actually in Canada these days. I was at a talk a couple months ago listening to John Stackhouse actually speak about how the chief editor of at the RBC Thought Leadership podcast. Anyway, he was speaking about how we've cut most of our foreign aid spending, and there hasn't really been a peep from the public, and sort of a good reflection of how our once proud peacekeeping and international spending has just flown under the radar because people are feeling really poorer in some ways, I would say. And one of the major reasons for that is the large cost of housing, which usually makes up the biggest part of people's budgets, especially middle to lower income households. And this cost has just been rising astronomically for the last couple decades, especially recently. So that's one of the major effects in terms of how rich we really feel as a country. But there's a few other areas, of course, as well.
Yeah, that's so cool. You know, it's such a good point that it is all so much of economic survival is how you feel, isn't it? And how people feel as opposed to their raw data, because nobody sits down and really calculates, not nobody, but rarely do you really sit down and calculate the percentage of your income that's going to housing or something like that. But, you know, for those of us who bought houses and more than doubled over the years, is the economy actually any better or any richer as a consequence of that?
Yeah, well, StatCan does try and track that more precisely, and for some of these lower income households, it's past the 75% mark in some cases, right? And that's a large portion of your income. But the other stats that are obviously very top of mind these days in Canada is one, which is a good indicator of how wealthy or the potential for an economy to create wealth is productivity. And Canada is one of the lowest, if I think maybe the lowest in the OECD in productivity. And the Bank of Canada has been speaking about this, and the OECD have released reports on this, where our projections into the future are also fairly bleak. So productivity is a huge indicator of how wealthy you are, and our workers are producing somewhere between 70 to 75% of the output of our neighbors to the south. The US is usually our comparison, and that's also where some of my research comes in, which is that what leads to increased productivity is investment in capital, and capital can be digital products, intellectual property, but also infrastructure and just tangible business investment. And our investment in those sectors has lagged behind the US as well by as much as 50%. So those are sort of the real indicators we're looking at in terms of our potential to create more wealth in the future. Yeah,
it's interesting because you see, for someone like myself who kind of looks around, investment in capital is hard to see because a lot of it obviously is paper versus sort of tangible. You do see some government investment in capital. In Toronto, we're building subways and things like that. so that you feel like there's some investment in capital there, but you don't see investment in capital. And then they're telling me there really is, compared to the US, a much significantly less investment in capital too.
Yeah, I thought of this quote the other day, which is, we've been rich for so long, we forgot how we got rich. I was just sort of mulling that over, trying to think back, how did Canada get rich, right? And we're a very resource-rich nation, and that's been a lot of the talk, about recent politics is unleashing some of that. And we're still yet to see. We're going to wait and see what these are big projects that take a long time to develop. And those are very important investments. I think, we'll leave maybe the transit system in Toronto investments aside. That's sort of a hot topic, but I'm not sure how much that is. We'd hope that'll increase, businesses unlock business investment. But in the long run, what we also touched on last episode was um, business owners, small to medium sized enterprises such as yourself, are really the backbone of the economy. So we really want to see how we can unlock that innovation and open up competition throughout the economy in other spaces, not just grand infrastructure projects, which I also think are super important.
Yeah, I always think, when you see that sort of tangible results that comes from a small business that opens up, and all of a sudden they've got two or three employees, and now you've got, two or three maybe potentially families that you're generating wealth for within this small enterprise. And the more we can encourage that growth and encourage those kind of pop-ups of entrepreneurial spirit, the better. But affordability, I guess, is the difficulty, and there's our generation, my generation anyway, that just sits back and enjoys the benefit of these tremendous increase in values on the houses. So I'm not adding much to the economy these days in that sense.
Yeah, that's, one of the questions around this issue is, the redistribution of wealth. What the radical middle with this show and what we'd like to work on is solutions that create wealth that increase the pie, right? There's a lot of talk in politics about how to redistribute what is already existing. Speaking of our existing wealth that we've built up over the past decades, which that gravy train may be running out at some point, right? So we're looking at ways that we can expand the whole pie and hopefully take some pressure off these households and also create the ability to start those businesses and unleash some entrepreneurial spirit, and just allow for people to you know live comfortable lives again, I suppose.
Well, it's such a like increasing the pie is such I mean, it's obviously a great idea, but it's obviously just a tremendously difficult thing to do in terms of moving the needle. I struggle watching, and I want to Canadianize our economy as much as we can, but uh, the reality is we are so tied to the U.S. economy in so many respects that uh, moving the needle doesn't seem to be moving the needle a lot of these small deals, which are billions of dollars with different countries, until we start to look at trying to chip away at the increase in the pie as opposed to redistributing the pie.
Yeah, exactly. We want to get back to building stuff in Canada, keeping some of these new technology companies in Canada or the talent in Canada, and that's the areas in which we need to be more innovative, I think. But that's what we touched on last class, or sorry, pardon me, our last episode is that's what the focus of the original political economist was, some 150 years ago was how do we increase the pie? And the way that they were looking at it was to maybe restrict those areas that are extracting from the pie but not expanding it, right? And that's sort of the heart of what we're looking at here, which is um, the role of real estate investment and other financial sector taking away from the ability to enlarge the pie. Um, but at the same time, it's creating wealth for some individuals. So, like we said, some people have definitely gotten richer, but as a country, we don't feel richer, and we seem a little bit precariously placed.
Yeah. And so do you think there is a window to taking the pedal off this lending toward housing only and reliability of lending? And do you think there's a way through this to create more lending to private sector from that standpoint? What is it, what are some of the solutions to that?
Yeah, so I think we touched on them in the previous episodes. I'm a huge fan of sort of more decentralized systems. We have a few, sort of business cooperatives around Canada where you have local community lending. And I think unleashing that to a larger degree would be very beneficial in terms of allowing small business loans in small communities across the country. So that got back to what we were speaking with decentralized finance,
Hmm.
where these our larger banks don't tend to be interested in that kind of lending. So it really starts from the top, but there's some radical solutions we can look at. But we need to re-incentivize those types of lending, and we can go into that in more detail maybe in our next episode of why the banks, currently favor credit allocation to real estate over tangible businesses.
Well, it's also a natural thing. I'm not, really in the business of criticizing the banks for doing what is easier, because if you go to tier two bit lending, most of that tier two lending is obviously secured by real estate as well, right? So it's not like the market is waiting for these opportunities, right? And so you're right. I mean, the only way we're going to do it is it's going to go to a decentralized system. And truthfully, that's happening. I mean, the digital economy and Bitcoin and so on is changing the whole psyche of money flow, which is, eventually, and I will give credit to the U.S. They are very forward thinking on their digital economy. If we can get to the point where the decentralized lending comes really through online tools, uh, we're going to be able to get to a position where we're not going to, it's almost like it's not tier two lending. It is sort of tier one lending, but in a different uh, cycle. And I really do think there's an opportunity for that. And I'm already a couple of people I've talked to about this. You can see them, they're starting to build businesses around that tier two lending that is driven not by a mortgage on your house.
Yeah, yeah. Well, those are the kind of things that we're hoping can unlock some more creative solutions, more more innovation. But yeah, it's a tough bubble to unwind, and maybe that's a bit of a buzzword that we don't, but there is a big debt overhang currently in the Canadian economy that we talked about. We're one of the highest private debts in the OECD as well, private debt loads to income, and so unwinding this will not potentially be pain free, but we're looking at solutions in the long run that sort of reorient economy to be self-sustainable, if you will, and that credit to be self-sustainable, right? We're printing a lot of money for in credit that's not self-sustaining, right? When we bid up existing asset prices and not building new real estate, but just the real estate that's already in place. Um, so these are the kind of solutions that people are thinking about, I hope. And I hope also our prime minister, I found out his PhD was about lowering competition, or no, increasing competition and the benefits of that. And so what we're sort of asking about is the, can we increase competitions in all areas of the economy? Because there are some areas that seem to be a little bit untouchable, including our big banks. And so it's not an easy one to compete with these existing institutions, partially because of the heavy regulation. But those are the areas that I think the creative solutions could really have the biggest impact, right?
Yeah, and I mean, that's the beauty of the sort of working around the big banks is that, regulation can be ignored when you're dealing with international uh, currencies through digital currencies, right? You're not regulated. And I think it's going to be the big struggle for all of the Western world to stop this trend of that. And so, there's lots of bad that can come with it. There's not as much traction, I mean, tracking of where the money's flowing, and those are things that FACTA and other major changes in the banking industry that really affected the movement of money worldwide. But the digital economies are going to drive this, and hopefully they're going to, I mean, not get lazy and just tie the lending all against real estate assets.
Yeah, and then that's the hope. And I like the optimism. And I think there's lots of reasons to be optimistic. But we'll have to wait and see what we can unlock with our policy, I suppose.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, this is really helpful, and I like the idea that we've got to create some optimism and create some more solutions to continue to work through what is a stagnant lending model that is really hurting us long term.
Yeah, and I think that there's lots of ways that we can turn the engine of wealth creation for individual households, which is that lending model, towards wealth for the entire nation. Um, but for now, I think it's not making us richer in the long run.
Yeah. Well, it's frustrating, I'm sure, for your generation, and we're just getting lazy. So, all right. Well, listen, Thomas, good to see you. Good to catch up on these ideas, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. It's all in human nature, I suppose. But we'll see you again soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Radical Middle Podcast. Check out our show notes for further reading. For any inquiries, reach out at theradicalmiddlemedia@gmail.com.